Naja, du hattest einige Stichworte gegeben. Konzentrieren wir uns auf.
You've given some keywords, so let's focus on a few. The EU-NATO story is interesting because in reality, even in this resolution we're discussing, I don't know, I haven't counted how often NATO is mentioned and referenced. But as an outsider reading it quickly, you might actually be confused about what the difference is. Does the EU, in its overwhelming majority, see itself differently, as the EU as a NATO member, as part of NATO? The resolution also talks about Ukraine's NATO membership. What does Ukraine's NATO membership have to do with the EU? How do you essentially see this? Regarding defense policy and foreign policy, the EU is increasingly questioning its own identity and almost its very basis of existence.
Well, I think the EU is not clear at all. I always wonder, what does it actually want? Sometimes you hear talks about how it should connect with NATO. NATO is, so to speak, the military arm of the European Union and so on. On the other hand, you hear, I was just at another EU meeting here, where it's always said that we need to militarize ourselves, have our own army, and who knows what else. Of course, the specter of Trump is behind this. They are all terribly afraid. No one really wants to mention that Trump might become president of the United States again, and that the EU would then be left completely alone militarily. Yes, so it's not clear at all. It's not clear at all that this is really the case. So I believe both NATO and the EU will suffer greatly if this war is truly lost. And I believe it's only a matter of months before this war is lost. And then NATO will have lost another war, even though it still thinks it is the largest military alliance in the world, and of course the EU as well, because we will have to pay the funds. So Trump's vice president just said that Germany, maybe he forgot Austria, they also have to pay, should pay for Ukraine. These are hundreds of billions coming our way. Hundreds of billions. I mean, it's complete madness. Peace would become insanely expensive. I don't see that happening at all. It's completely unrealistic. Many war supporters like Poland will protest heavily. They are already saying it can't be because the people who were executed back then in World War II or in between need to be properly buried first, and so on. But behind this, of course, is the fear in Poland that all these agricultural subsidies they receive in large amounts will now be redirected to Ukraine. That's how they see it too. It's completely unclear. I believe the whole politics is unclear. And that's because the principle is irrational. What does the European Union want? And I've experienced many wars. We are constantly talking about emotional, moral things here. Wars are not about morality, they are about interests. And I wonder what interest should the Europeans or the European Union and its member states have in a war with Russia? What interest? What do they want to gain from it? So they cut themselves off from resources. They cut themselves off from markets in Asia. They are harming their economy with the sanctions. They have an insane expenditure on weapons there, and now another 50 billion to keep Ukraine alive at all. That will become much more. So it is a completely irrational thing why Europe does not try to create peace on their own continent, or at least make an attempt. They don't want that, not even make the attempt. And that, I believe, is something that will harm us greatly. It will harm us. You cannot behave irrationally in politics. You have to acknowledge reality as it is, and then you can make policy, but not like what we are doing there.